back to, you are speaking, and I can see free speech above your written over there, and so many of the discussions this morning, especially Mr. Ross's comments that no one can regulate the content that is on out there, I mean, in cyberspace. But my question is, you know, in Lebanon lately there have been a big issue about data, the telecom data. I don't want to go into Lebanese politics, but I just want to ask you, what are the best practices in that sense, in that area, in developed markets? Do regulators, telecom regulators, have the right to monitor my BDM flow or my Twitter, or what are the best practices before we talk about the region here?
No, let's put things into the right perspective. I switched to Arabic when you bring Lebanese politics.
By default.
Very natural reflex. The most important thing is that the discussion about telecoms data and information is always overused and abused in political speech and in free speech. There are three different things to talk about. One is access to information, or lawful access to information, under a legal framework that is allowed by the government that this information resides in. And this is a common practice across the world, where you have a legal authority to access information. It's not telecom operators that do it, it's not companies that do it, it's actually not even governments that should be doing it. The best practice is that the legal system of a country should be the authorizing authority to access information.
In the United States, who monitors? Does anyone monitor your BDM or your
monitoring is one thing, and lawful intercept and access of information is another thing. Access of information is a legal activity that is governed by the legal authorities of a given country. And this is a major issue around the world, because technically speaking, if your information resides on a server in the US, the US court has the right to access that information without coming back to a court in your national jurisdiction. Okay? And this is quite dangerous, because you could be tried in the US for something you have online that is residing in the US without the permission, for example, of the Lebanese legal authorities or any other country. That's one thing. The second point is about accessing information unlawfully, or monitoring traffic, or banning traffic and regulating traffic. That goes against the ultimate goal of freedom of information and speech. And that varies from country to country. But at the ultimate level, as was mentioned this morning, this is a space that is still predominantly, if we take the average around the world, predominantly an open space without any interference, except with some countries, such as some countries in the region, such as, for example, China, where there are restrictions on the content that can be broadcast and put online.
Just a quick follow-up. You remember that issue when Saudi Arabia and the UAE were saying that they will ban BlackBerry services unless RIM puts its servers in the UAE and in Saudi Arabia. What was that about? Why is it important where the servers are located?
Yes, it's for the reasons I was mentioning earlier. One is that lawful intercept can only happen if the server is residing in your country. So if you have a legal right to access the information that, for example, a terrorist is exchanging with another terrorist, or so on, you can legally access it if the server is in your country. If it's not in your country, you need the legal permission of the authorities of the other country. So that's one main reason for it. There's also an example in China, which is another reason why Google, for example, I'm going to talk about this later on, from Google, why Google pulled out of China, because the Chinese authorities not only wanted to access the information of users of Google and to block certain sites from appearing when people search for them, they also wanted to steal the technology of Google and get into the source code of the software to be able to block it and create it. And that's quite malicious in that sense. So there are many ways that the data is important to be open. And when we talk about data itisalat, the one that you mentioned, it is about the lawful access to this data for the security purposes under the legal authorities' authorization of the given country. But it can be talked about.
I want your remarks on this, but also I want your thoughts on what happened in Egypt post-revolution when the Vodafone and Mobile just just shut down the data network after the revolution started. And then Vodafone issued a statement saying, well, if we didn't shut down the network, we were instructed to do that by the regulator. And if we didn't do it ourselves, the regulator could have shut down the networks. Is that common practice everywhere? Can the government shut down the data network anywhere?
Before I answer this question, I'd like to make a comment. The data intercept is in new point in civilized countries where the legal system is totally independent and there's a trust in the legal system. It becomes a big issue when we have either dictatorship or totalitarian regimes, or worse, we don't trust our legal system. This is a point that is only raised in our region. If we have, right, okay. To go back to your key question, cellular operators in our region have one main client, which is to serve the subscribers. This is where they make their money. But they've got a big stick called the government, whereby they bypass all the regulatory body, they bypass all the legal system, and impose either restrictions or give out instructions. In a legal framework, a government is not allowed to give instructions to a legal operator to shut down a network. It's unheard of. In our region, it's the law.
Unfortunately. Now, I do have a comment on that, where are the limits for government intervention?
It boils back to the principle at hand, which is sovereignty of nations. Each country has the right to have its own laws, and then the internet came, and the internet is a global phenomenon. Servers in one country serve consumers in other countries, and so on. And ever since then, we've been grappling with that. It's not just undemocratic countries or China. It's also Western Europe. Germany doesn't allow neo-Nazi memorabilia. The US protects that as part of the freedom of speech, and they had problems of what if it's a server in the US accessed by Germans. Similarly in France with Amazon and so on. But I think now the consensus is being shaped so that regulate ex post, not ex ante. Basically, the internet, keep it free, but if somebody breaks the laws of your country, then based on what they did, have the judicial review and have the legal framework to tackle that issue, but don't censor it at the starting level and filter it. In Jordan, for example, our government just recently, our parliament just enacted a new press and publication law, very vaguely termed, and we actually had a discussion with a senior member of parliament, and we asked him we asked him point blank, what about Twitter wars and Facebook wars in the writing of the law? And his point was, yes, they have to be registered. So actually, in his interpretation of the law, I have to register my Facebook wall with the government because it's an electronic medium. And this law has passed in Jordan. But then we had another government that said, yeah, forget about it. We're not going to look at that law too seriously. We're not going to implement it too rigorously.
But that's like they can persecute anyone if they don't like what they post on whatever they want.
Absolutely. The current law in Jordan now basically can be interpreted by a willing government that requires every Twitter user and every Facebook user to register with the government that Twitter or Facebook.
Unfortunately. Let's take a few questions from the audience because our time is running out. So please, if you have a question for any of our panelists, give me a sign and we'll pass on the microphone to you to address your question to our speakers. Can we pass on the microphone to the third row? And also there's a raised hand over there if we can prepare another microphone. Okay, let's start from the back. I'm sorry, the microphone is closer to the back.
Hello, my name is Roman Kinashan. I have a question regarding the discussions that was about disconnecting from the current social networks that we are, from the current network we are living here, for example, for Twitter. So beginning of this conference, they told, okay, let's go to Twitter and you tweet and you get let's say, gift from Samsung or whatever. While I don't know, sorry, I forgot the name. Mr. Hassan was saying that maybe I was answering the questions that you are asking on Twitter while you are asking this question. So ironically is that yesterday I watched a video on the internet. It's the title of Disconnect to Connect. So basically it's pushing to disconnect from the social media to connect in your social life. But at the same time, they are using social media to push people to disconnect from the social media. So
well, that shows how powerful social media has become, that they would use it as a tool to pass on this message.
Yeah, but the question to be asked is how to push people to use efficiently and for business the social media instead of using it instead of the current social life that you have.
Thank you. Hassan, would you like to?
No, absolutely. I think look, we're still at the infancy of this whole thing. As I mentioned earlier today, social media as a whole is a new social environment that society is evolving within. In a way, it's a form of digital Darwinism, if you like. It's like where the loudest and the most opinionated get to dominate that space and gets followed over it. And I think companies are starting to learn now that trick to start organizing themselves around this. And people, ourselves as social media users, are also evolving. If you use social media more than 2 to 3 years actively, you start learning the habits and you start learning when to focus on your social connections and how to use it efficiently and effectively, and when to bridge your life into real life and build real networks. It's exactly like what's happening today at this conference. Take this small example. You walk outside, you go on a coffee break, and over lunch later on, and you talk to people, meet people, you exchange contact details, and you learn more about them. You come into this room, I see more heads looking right this way, heads looking up actually, and fingers working. So it depends on the setting and the use and which network, whether the physical network or the digital network, are more effective for the purpose that you are trying to achieve. But society in general is still trying to find a balance between the two, and I hope by the end of today we'll find a little bit more scientific way to achieve that.
Jawad has a comment.
I think, frankly, Wi-Fi, 3G, and social media on smartphones is the best thing that's happened to conference organizers, because after lunch, or it used to be before that people would go for conferences and actually mingle, but now because everybody can engage socially while staying put in the hall, now we still have a lot more attendance in the halls throughout the conference day. And that's why every conference has Wi-Fi.
Let's take another question. Yes, please.
Habib, bonjour. Please, can we use Twitter for business, and how we can use and bigger of our customers?
If we were to give recommendations, how would you increase your customer base through Twitter? David, how would you do that?
I can spread the word about my product or service, and hopefully other people will use their word of mouth to tell other people about me, yeah, and so recommend me, and maybe there will be a discussion, and this might be productive, yeah, but give it a try and be open. I think that's the best recommendation.
It's also build loyalty base, because when I read that Starbucks was the best brand, I went to the handle at Starbucks and I was looking at their tweets, and it's so personalized. Like, for example, happy birthday, John, very nice of you to comment on that, Jim. So basically they are interacting with their customers on a personal basis. And there are also, they ask their customers' opinion on certain products on Twitter, and they get feedback about that.
So let me give you a very practical feedback from a recently launched study on social network usage in business. Very interesting question. Just think about this. Who do you think, which kind of companies actually use Twitter more than Facebook, for example? In fact, Facebook is the #1 social media platform used for marketing purposes by companies. The interesting thing is that about 90% of companies use Facebook even if they don't have experience in using social media. The more experienced the company is in the use of social media, i.e., that is, a company that uses social media more than 3 years uses Twitter as much as Facebook. A company that uses social media for less than 6 months, new starter in this, they use Facebook much more than Twitter. I'll give you a number. Twitter is used in less than 67% of companies that have just started social media. Those who have been online for more than 3 years, actually, 90% of them use Twitter and 90% of them use Facebook.
But that's because also you need more personnel to take care of Twitter. I mean, you need someone to follow up on Twitter every day, so you need the people in place, and you
Yes, absolutely. And the more experienced the company is, the bigger the marketing group that actually uses social networks, particularly Twitter, and the more hours spent on marketing. More than 30 hours, as I mentioned before, are spent in these more experienced companies. And then LinkedIn and the blogs and YouTube come after that.
Dr. Dalil, the irony of all that is that Facebook and Twitter's Facebook share price is being hammered because they haven't figured out a way to make money out of all that. So they haven't yet figured out a way to monetize all that popularity and turn it into profits. So
they should ask Google.
I hope you can pick up the conversation, Muhammad, in a later session. Where will that money come from later on?
We are all betting that something's going to happen. But it's funny you mentioned Facebook. There's a small app within Facebook called Farmville. I'm sure some of you have played it. It's a free app.
Farmville is the game, right?
Yeah, it's a game.
I don't play that game.
I don't either, but I'm sure there are a lot of people that play that game. Farmville is a free app. They have 65 million users. They have 15 people that are the developers. They introduce on a regular basis new features to make the experience, this is what they call it, more enjoyable. They end up selling 800,000 tractors per day. That company that owns that app is making $200 million a year, whereas Facebook cannot figure out how to make the money.
They're just sharing in the profits, I guess.
What's happening to Facebook and Twitter is, to a lesser extent, what's happening to the mobile market. We're providing the highway, but we can't make money on the traffic going through.
A final question. I think our time has run up. Do we have any questions? Let's take a final question from the audience. The lady. Yes.
Christine Sheikh, I'm a journalist. Currently, Facebook is planning to delete all fake accounts as a step to help businesses define their target audience. Other than resorting to specialists of social media, how could Facebook define what is the best way for Facebook to define their target audience?
David,
or even other social media tools.
Just know a bit about this. Facebook is trying hard to pursue fake accounts, but they put certain regulations and procedures that makes it extremely difficult to remove those accounts in a timely fashion. It is the way Facebook started. They wanted to be open, it's an open forum. Right now it is very difficult to backtrack. They should have, from day one, made the right procedures. If you want to register, show me the proof that this is new. It is a bit late to do that.
If you can answer that and also answer whether Facebook is making money from the data that it has about us. Like it knows who I am and who my friends are and all my personal data.
That's a very important point. Look, we are in a conference about freedom of speech, spread of internet, and human connections. And yet, this is a trap that most companies fall into. They start with a very, very benevolent, very well thought of idea of free openness, freedom, etc. When they make it to a global scale of a billion users plus, then they start figuring out a way to make money and start regulating it and blocking it and shutting it up, so that defeats the whole purpose of creating an open network. Now, the challenge is then to do something like this. You need to start getting into customer data, into the privacy of this information that exists online. And this is a very big debate. We were having this debate at the World Economic Forum at Davos earlier this year, between the European constituents and regulators and the US regulators. The US wanted an open system. In the terms of the US with an open system, that actually means we want to access your data, but you can't access anything else from our data. That's what they mean by access. The Europeans were rejecting that. They were saying no US-based or any other country-based company can access consumer information inside Europe. You need to be based in Europe, you have to have an office in Europe, and you have to be subject to European privacy laws before you can be allowed to do that. And Vivian Redding, the commissioner responsible for regulations in Europe, was actually stressing the point that all laws produced in Europe regarding freedom, access to information and privacy will be based on the fact that the consumer and the individual is the sole owner of his own personal data. So if that is passed, and it has been passed in Europe and it's advanced this kind of laws, it will be very difficult for someone like Facebook to actually go into the consumer data openly and try to do something like this. I think I agree with Dr. Darul, it's a bit too late to start to try to monetize Facebook in this particular way. I think, again, they should learn from Google how to do it.
I'm sorry, but I'm getting signs from the organizers that we have to wrap it up.
Facebook's problem is with the share price that their profits are not growing as fast as Google's.
And maybe it doesn't justify the valuation. Anyway, gentlemen.
Just a last point. Social media is here to stay. Data is the next wealth, frontier of wealth. But social media is a tool and a weapon. Use it wisely. Just as a side example, I said 65 million users, not 65 billion users. I saw it. And second, no, I'm not tweeting under the table.
Thank you very much for an interesting discussion. Thank you very much for bearing with us.
Now the third session, it's entitled New Media and the Battle for Supremacy. I invite the moderator of this session, Mr. Bassam Touaini, CEO of Naharnet and PowerMe Mobile, to introduce this session and the speakers, and of course it will be followed by the lunch break.